One thing I really liked, you had a great debate with Gary's Economics on
Yeah.
Diary of a CEO. Got quite heated
It
at
did.
some times. And what's interesting is that it seemed like on YouTube, a lot of people, or at least the top comments, agreed with Gary. But on Twitter,
Yeah.
everyone was agreeing with you. And I saw the stark difference between where people were hanging out and congregating online in terms of like which belief they aligned with. But for those who haven't seen it, Gary argued that the system is rigged and the average young person is getting poorer, while you argued for entrepreneurship and fewer barriers. What do you think he got most wrong in his view on how to fix inequality?
I think his solution for inequality may have worked 50 years ago, maybe 60, 70 years ago, because we lived in a world back then where the wealthiest people had physical locations. They had physical businesses. If you were wealthy 60, 70 years ago, the 1950s, you probably owned a factory or an office, you had people in that office, and there was no way you were going to run that remotely. Like it was impossible that you could move to Dubai and have a remote, business. So you could overtax people. It was very, very difficult for people to just throw their toys out the pram and leave and be fine about it. The issue that Gary's not taking into consideration now is that the rules have fundamentally shifted. I go to a gym in London, and I asked my trainer, who owns this gym? Oh, it's an Australian guy. I'm like, oh yeah, like is he around here? He's like, no, he lives in Australia. And it's like, well, how does he run this gym in London? Oh, he just like via Zoom. He's got a manager and he runs it remotely. So you can have almost any business that you just run remotely now, that you can be anywhere in the world. So the issue that Gary, he's not considering second and third order consequences. So you ramp up taxes on wealth and all of that. And of course, it's kind of like, imagine if I said to you, look, winning tennis is pretty easy. All you have to do is just serve the ball really hard and ace, just ace them. And if you keep doing that, well then, you'll win all the points. You say, yeah, but you're up against Roger Federer. He knows how to return the serve. Like he knows what to do next. So it's like ramp up the taxes on the rich and wealthy entrepreneurs, and they're like, oh, okay, this is no longer an attractive country. I'll just move my company somewhere that is attractive to do it. In the UK, 1% of people pay 30% of taxes, 10% of people pay 60% of the taxes. So you don't need many people to leave in order to crash the economy.
Why do you think there's so much inequality, though? Because you hear people saying that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer.
Now that is the question, and that is the question Gary should be asking. His answer for why is there inequality is because inequality creates inequality. So it's a circular reasoning. There's inequality because there is inequality, and the inequality gets worse because of the inequality. The reason for inequality, all inequality, is an advantage, right? Think about it just logically. If there's inequality in a sports team, one sports team has an advantage, right? So what is it? Maybe this team's taller. Maybe this team's been training harder. Maybe this team is a rookie team versus a professional team. Whatever it is, there's always an advantage. So the question is, what's the advantage? Like, what is the advantage right now? The biggest advantage is technology. And technology creates inequality. And a simple example would be if we all were up against each other in a marathon race and I've got a bicycle and you guys are running on foot, we don't have to think too hard about who's going to win, right? My technological advantage, if I have a piece of technology that I can leverage and you're not leveraging that same technology, if I read the rule book and it said you can either run or cycle, and you guys go, well, historically it's always been running, so I'm going to do it the traditional way of putting on my laces and running with my running shoes. I'm like, well, the rules changed. You can use a bicycle now. In fact, you can use a car. I'm going to use a car, right? So I do my 26 miles in a car, enjoying the air conditioning and texting at the same time. You guys are running your asses off, sweating it out. And it's like, well, there's a massive inequality in our finishing times because I leveraged technology and you didn't leverage technology.
Yeah.
So technology is the advantage. The reason that society is dividing in two is because especially AI has two superpowers. Superpower number one is the ability to get you to consume way more than you thought. You go on TikTok thinking, oh yeah, I'll just have a little look at TikTok for 10 minutes. 2 hours later, you're still scrolling. That's technology. That's an algorithm. That's AI that did that to you. It hacked your attention. When you've got a cat and there's a laser pointer, and the laser pointer looks like something to attack and the cat goes running after it, its primitive brain can't keep up with the fact that there's this thing called a laser pointer. We are now that cat chasing dopamine through these scrolling mechanisms, and plenty of people now have 6-7 hours a day on their screen. So the AI is doing that to us. It's creating hyper consumers. So half the population, or more than half the population, is going down the hyper consumption route. And then the second piece of superpower for AI is hyper creator. So if you're using AI to create stuff, you're creating all these things with the support of AI. Now you can do superhuman work. So there are people in my circle, I bet you guys as well, where I say, oh, what are you working on at the moment? They're like, oh, I've got a book on the go. I'm organizing a conference. We're doing a retreat for this. We're launching a SaaS product. I've got a team of 10 people who are working on this. And I've got some people in the Philippines who are like outsourcing to this and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, wow, how are you doing this with like just a small dynamic little team? It's like, well, we use a lot of tech. We've got an amazing tech stack. So these people are using technology to their advantage. These people are being used by technology to their disadvantage. And that is the fundamental wedge. This is the bifurcation of society, and it's going to get so much worse by 2030.
Isn't this just going to continue, like you said, just getting worse and worse and worse, making it harder for the average person to compete? Because the way I see it is that maybe 50 years ago, you had every local economy served by those few businesses. And so it was easy to kind of spread things around, or people could earn a pretty good living being in one town, serving that
That's
town.
it.
But now you're competing against Amazon and one big giant retailer who's able to undercut everything.
Yeah.
And then they just keep getting bigger. And it's like, how do you compete against something that big? And isn't this just going to continue getting worse?
The penalty for being average has never been so severe. But the payoff for being great has never been so high. Now, are you familiar with a distribution called a bell curve?
Mm-hmm.
And the opposite of a bell curve is a power law. So the Industrial Revolution moved everything to an even distribution on a bell curve, where essentially everyone's life fit within a nice little average bell curve distribution. Most doctors aren't the same as all other doctors. Even around the 1950s and 1960s, blue-collar workers earned pretty much the same as white-collar workers. Like it was a margin, it might have been 10 or 20% difference, but it was mostly the same neighborhoods and the same people and all of that sort of stuff. So everything had moved towards this bell curve. Digital technology moves everything onto a power law. So in the world of dating, 1% of daters do 90% of the people who want to date them.
Yeah, Jack.
It's Jack's fault, right? He's lying about all of his stats here. He's got his photoshopped pictures online. And so what happens with power laws is you get something like the 1% that does at least 30%. And technology moves everything from a bell curve to a power law. So it really does do this. Now, there are a new set of rules that will allow you to build your own mini power law where you can carve out a micro niche, that you can build a brand within that micro niche, and you can actually have your own little power law where you're the king of that power law. That does exist. The biggest thing I keep coming back to in this is that there's the old set of rules and the new set of rules. The old set of rules worked really well. So prior to 2000, the benefits of being average were huge, probably the best in human history. In all of human history, it was the best time to be average. Just an average person did well. If you were average, you got a house, you got a car, you got a holiday. You didn't have to take on lots of debt. You got education, you got rising wages, income security, retirement security, healthcare. Like all of it was packaged up for the middle of the bell curve. And all they said is just play by the rules and you'll get all of this stuff. And the middle of the bell curve's there. After 2000, we moved slowly and then rapidly towards this power law. People are like, hey, I'm playing by the rules. I'm a good average person, right? And it's like, yeah, the penalty for being average is now severe. You can't be average. I'm not saying this is right. I'm not saying this is the way.
Right, you're saying it's how it is.
I'm just observing what is. Like, I can only play the cards that I've been dealt. If I could wave a magic wand and go back to 1999, I'd say, fantastic. Like, let's freeze in time. Let's have that economy. Let's get rid of everyone's smartphone. You can all have a Nokia 3210. And we'll take away social media or whatever. That would probably be good for most people. But I can only play the cards we're dealt.
Let's play devil's advocate for a second in that debate between you and Gary. His main points, if you were to argue how they are correct, What would you say?
Well, for starters, his identification of the problem is bang on. He's raising the alarm on the problem, and he should be raising the alarm on the problem, because most politicians still think that it's 1960 as well, right? So all the politicians are caught in the past. He's raising a red flag and saying, hey, there's a huge problem and it's getting worse. However, if you look at something called the clinical method, which is how doctors and how the medical industry works, there is the problem, there is what's causing the problem, and then there is the treatment plan that's appropriate for those causes. Gary just is stuck on the problem. And the annoying thing is we all agree, like everyone can see the problem. That's not pointing at a fire doesn't make you a firefighter. It just says, okay, you notice that the building's on fire. That's great. Screaming about it. Okay, good. We all understand the building is on fire. So what he does really, really well is he brings attention to the fact that there is a big problem, that a lot of people who are playing by the rules are not getting ahead. A big section of society, the rug is being pulled from under them. So that's fantastic. Where I worry is that he's jumping from being extremely good at articulating the problem to then just going, the solution is this. And what most people who are watching him are doing is they're going, because he's so good at articulating the problem, he must have a really good solution. And those things are not necessarily correlated. Sometimes people are good at understanding the problem, but they don't identify the cause or the right treatment plan. So you actually have to have all three of those things in the chain in order to fix something. You have to problem, cause, and treatment.
It seems like he's really emphasizing the victim mindset, though, and getting people hooked on this emotional feeling like it is impossible for me, the system is rigged against me, I'm the underdog, and therefore I should be outraged and there's nothing I could do about it, but I gotta follow Gary.
Like, by the way, I get it. Like, it sucks. It really sucks. We all went to a schooling system, and the schooling system taught us how to be and how to behave, and like gave us a set of rules. And now, if you play by those rules, you don't get ahead, and that really does suck. And it feels like we've now. The other interesting thing too is that when I was growing up, you had almost no visibility as to what the lives of a wealthy person looked like. Like, you knew that maybe they had a Rolls Royce, or maybe that they had a Ferrari. You kind of drove past big houses, and you might have wonder what the people who live in those houses do, right? But you didn't really have a lot of visibility into that. Today, you open your phone and it's just, this guy's got a new Lamborghini, and, she's now hanging out in Thailand, having an amazing holiday, and living the dream. And you go through and you're scrolling through and you're going, gee, my life really sucks. I'm on the wrong side of this. And obviously, it's amplified by social media, this discontent. So I get the outrage, but outrage doesn't solve anything. Like, you can either wait. Here's the choices you've got. You can either wait for the entire economic system of the world to change and to go hyper-socialist, perfectly redistribute the wealth, not crash the economy like it does every single other time they implement socialism. Or you can say, hey, guess what? The rules have changed. Some people know those rules. I can learn from those people. I can play by those rules. I've got to throw away some of the stuff that I learned in the past. I've got to join an entrepreneurial team, learn from a new mentor, right? Go through a bit of a process. Like, it's not like the money has disappeared off the planet. The money's there. Like, we have money on this planet. It's just that it's not flowing down the same rivers that it used to flow down. Got to go and find the new rivers.